खुसरो रैन सुहाग की जागे पी के संग तन मेरो मन पियो को दो एक रंग का एक रंग दो भय एक रंग
आधी बीज एकले. This was a beautiful song from the movie Sant Tukaram, Marathi movie Sant Tukaram. It was written by Shri Shantaram Athwale. Adhi bija ekale. There was just a seed at the beginning. Bija ankurale. The seed germinated. Then कोटी कोटी तरु फुले फळे विस्तारले. That developed into millions of trees, flowers and fruits. Just like that, the consciousness, the omnipresent God, the omniscient God, that was like a seed. Brahman was like a seed, and that seed eventually developed into a big tree. Then it continued to propagate. This is a beautiful idea that comes in Marathi literature, Marathi movie rather, and that was Sant Tukaram. Seeds have a potential of a story. These stories emerge out from the soil, and as if they are in search of light. These trees grow towards the light. They emerge out from the soil and they grow towards light. Just like the notion of tamasoma jyotirgamaya in Indian Upanishads. Travel or a journey from darkness towards the light. Shoot actually says this, tells this story of transcending from darkness to light. Then come the roots. Roots are positively geotropic. They enter into the soil. They move towards the center of earth from the surface. What is famously known as the geotropism. And the shoot travels towards the light. That is what we call as phototropism. There were a lot of studies at the end of 19th century and 20th century on this idea of shoot growing towards light, what we call as phototropism in botany. A shoot grows from darkness to light. And on this idea, there was based the concept of the plant hormone known as auxin that travels down from the shoot tip towards the roots or towards the basal part of the plant. These auxins, they are usually secreted from the cells or tissues at the shoot tip from the illuminated side, and they diffuse towards the darker side. Diffusion of auxins from the shoot tip from the illuminated side to the dark side, that results into cell elongation. This cell elongation that takes place in the darker part of the shoot and not to the illuminated side, that results into growth of cells to the left side, to the darker side, and that would eventually result into bending of the shoot towards the illuminated part. One more beautiful example is heliotropism. Helios is sun. If you see the beautiful sunflower heads inflorescence, actually to call them as flower is a misnomer. It is a bunch of ray florets and disc florets. This sunflower, its binomial name is Helianthus annus. This Helianthus, this sunflower, it follows the path of sun. It moves from east to west. So for the entire day, this movement takes place from the east side to the west side, following the path of sun. This is something called heliotropism. But roots, they enter into the soil, penetrate into the soil in search of nutrition. The most interesting part is some plants, they grow even on the walls, as we see on the walls of some old temples. People grows out from that. The seed of Ficus religiosa, people, is extremely small. In Marathi, that is called pimpuri. And from that, there grow the plantlets on the wall of temples or houses or the rocks. This is interesting. The roots grow into the soil, what we call as the geotropism or gravitropism. And when they penetrate into the soil, the root tip has some cells called statocytes. These statocytes, they sense the gravity. They are filled with some structures called statoliths, and that results into elongation of root tip, and that further penetrates into the soil. These roots, they are much important. Roots are much important. May that be our own life, may that be history of a nation, or may that be the notion of botany. Roots are very much important. The paradox of power versus thought, humility versus arrogance, dogmatism versus reasoning, innovations versus nepotism. These are the root causes of conflicts for centuries together. Socrates taught his disciple Plato
how to reason. But he was accused of corrupting the minds of youth. He was sentenced to death. Then Plato fled to Italy. The region which has the roots in Roman civilization. He happened to meet disciples of a great mathematician and philosopher, Pythagoras, there. These disciples, the Pythagoreans, their simplicity was impressive. Plato learned many things from these Pythagoreans also. When he returned back to Athens at the age of 40, he founded his famous academy, which is the foundation of today's modern Europe, something called Greek miracle, Romulus. Romulus was son of Mars and Rhea Silvia, a Vestal virgin. Vestal virgins related with Roman mythology remind us about the very idea of abstinence that lies in religion. The idea of Kanyakumari, Comarin in the word of British philosophers and writers, that comes from the same notion in Sanatan Dharma. Vestal Virgin. A great saint, Upasni Baba, disciple of Sai Baba, re-established the notion of these Kanyakumari by training women with the Yajna system, in 20th century. It was a great controversy that time that women were taught about the Vedic rituals, but Upasni Baba took a care to maintain the sanctity of the entire system by establishing a system of yajnas conducted by Kanyakumaris. Romulus was saved by a she-wolf and woodpecker. And this is how perhaps the importance of shepherds and sheep comes into Christianity. Romulus is supposed to be the first god who established the Rome almost 750 years before Christ. The notion of Roman democracy, the idea of Senate, comes from Romulus, who made an institution of that Senate. This simply means the roots of democracy are in the righteous king. The literature of Kalidas became favorite literature of many Western philosophers just because that Sanskrit literature is filled with the stories of righteous kings, noble kings. The idea of religion lies in the symbolic interpretation of unity based upon values and virtues. But when the cost supersedes the value, things become rigid. They are moreover divisive and less inclusive. If we look at the prop roots of ficus, the banyan tree, Ficus bengalensis, those reach the ground from their branches. These roots, they anchor in the soil, and the propagation of this ficus takes place. In Kolkata, the Royal Botanical Garden has a forest of almost 25 acres covered by a single tree of banyan that has grown through the branches, what we call as prop roots. These prop roots we can see in the Southeast Asia, covering the temple tops. Perhaps they are searching the sacred foundation of a religion. Roots are not just meant for absorption. They are not selfish. Plants are not selfish. But it is moreover an exchange of metabolites between the roots and organisms those live in the rhizosphere. Rhiza means root, and the portion of the soil that has impact of those roots, the roots interact with that region of soil that is called rhizosphere. A plethora of microbe species and fungi interact with the roots of plants. On the flip side, there are parasites and pathogens too. Why they are essential? Because they stimulate the roots to activate their defense system, the immunity system.
Plants are not selfish. Roots, in fact, exchange the material with the surrounding soil. Primary and secondary metabolites produced by that plant, they are released on the surface of root in very subtle amount. A wheat crop, its roots, that would exude out an amount of just 5 to 6 grams of root exudate into the soil. These exudates are rich with carbohydrates, amino acids, and other nutritive substances. This nutrition is actually for the billions of bacteria that surround those roots. You would say that why just a 5 to 6 gram, and what is so special about that? But imagine a crop of wheat that is spread over some hectares. Then you can imagine the large amount of nutritives those are released by that entire crop into the soil. If we imagine the cultivated land of India, approximately estimated to be 155 million hectares, then the total amount of root exudate contributed by those crop plants, they are extraordinary. They sequester carbon, they release out these root exudates into the soil, and these root exudates are substances on which a plethora of microorganisms, they survive. Soil bacteria, for example, some fungi, some protists, all of them, they survive on these root exudates. Imagine the service actually farmers offer, what we call as the ecosystem services in modern notion. See, when a farmer is taking a crop in a cultivated land, he is not simply offering the food that is harvested from that, but actually it is also a process of soil reconstruction, or a process of developing the soil texture, structure, and its nutritional components. Plants are extremely important, and farmers are unsung heroes of ecology. They contribute a lot to the soil, to the atmosphere, and that is where the sustainable practices, they are much important. Soil isn't just a withered form of rock. The process of soil formation in geology, that is because of withering of a rock for years together. And this withering, by the various changes in the seasons, the rains, the summer, the winter, all these changes in the weather, they contribute to this process. The rock withers into smaller, finer and finer particles, and that makes the soil. But soil isn't just a physical mass of withered rock. Soil is more than that. Billions of, trillions of microorganisms, what we call as soil microflora, they survive in this soil. They grow in this soil. These microbes, these soil microbes, which grow in this soil, they acquire nutrition from those root exudates. And that is actually the nourishment of the microflora in the soil by those plants. These plants are actually taking care of these microorganisms, because this is going to be a symbiotic relationship. These microbes would help plants. There is an interesting idea, a notion of biogeochemical cycles in ecology, in biology. Biogeochemical cycles, for example, the carbon cycle, or maybe the phosphorus cycle or nitrogen cycle, the substances are recycled. They're recycled from soil to the plants, and again, there is recycling of these materials. Bacteria contribute to this process. Nitrifying bacteria, nitrogen fixing bacteria, denitrifying bacteria. Lot of different bacterial forms, they contribute to the recycling of these components from atmosphere, from the surrounding to the living world, and again into the soil. This is an interesting process. These biogeochemical cycles are contributed by these microorganisms which live in the soil. This happens at such a subtle level that we cannot observe that. Just look at the process of gaseous exchange taking place in the leaves. Leaves have minute microscopic pores, and these microscopic pores on their surface, they are the breathing organs of that leaf. These stomata open, close, and this opening and closure of stomata, that is just like the breathing process. There is gaseous exchange taking place. Plants consume carbon dioxide, fix that through the process of photosynthesis, release out oxygen, and we survive upon that. Not only this much, but there is a context to the soil again. What happens is plants release out water vapor, and this water vapor is, this process is called transpiration. So when water vapor, which is so subtle, not visible, that leaves from the millions of stomata present on the surface of a leaf outside, then all those leaves of that entire tree, they generate a kind of suctional force that is called transpirational pull. This transpirational pull helps to absorb water and nutrients and carry them again towards the leaves. So these things which occur with these plants, they are extremely subtle. They help the microflora in the soil to survive. They also help the living world by supplying the oxygen, what is called pranavayu in Sanskrit. Thank you, friends, for listening me so kindly. This is Lakshmi Raman Ozha, and you are watching SBTL Webcasts.